My stepdaughter accused me of abuse when I refused her $7,000 for her business, but when I recorded her confession, admitting it was all lies, I exposed her and destroyed her extortion plan. I'm 46 years old, I work as a construction project manager, and honestly, I never thought I'd be telling this story because what happened basically destroyed my second marriage and left me with trauma that, truth be told, I don't know if it'll ever completely go away. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I met Melissa about 4 years ago, I mean, my first wife Sarah and I had gotten divorced about 3 years before that. It was an amicable divorce, no drama. We just didn't work as a couple anymore, but we still got along. And I was at a point in my life where I thought maybe it was time to try again, you know? I met Melissa at a local art exhibition. She was an art teacher at a high school. She was 43, creative and sweet. And she mentioned she had a daughter from a previous relationship, Olivia, who at that time was like 14 years old, and well, Olivia's father, Christopher, had abandoned them when the girl was barely 2 years old and had gone to live in Texas, basically. Disappeared from their lives except for a monthly check he sent occasionally. Things with Melissa went well at first. We took our time. We dated for about a year and a half before I met Olivia. And when I finally met her, she seemed like a normal teenager, a bit quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. Melissa and I got married when Olivia was 16, and that's when she moved into my house, a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood that I had bought years ago when I was still with Sarah. I have to admit that at first I tried to be the understanding stepfather. You know, I didn't want to be the typical ogre who comes in imposing rules. So I gave Olivia space. I set up a nice room for her. I tried to connect with her by talking about her interests. But from the beginning, something felt off. Like she saw me not as a father figure or even as her mother's husband, but like an ATM or a hotel with service included. The first 6 months after the wedding were relatively normal. Or at least, that's what I thought. But then, Olivia started with increasingly absurd demands. First it was that she wanted to completely redecorate her room, not just paint the walls or buy some new furniture. No, she wanted to basically turn the room into a luxury hotel suite. We're talking thousands of dollars in designer furniture, a 65-inch TV, a desk that cost like $800. And when Melissa asked me to consider it, I agreed to some reasonable things, but said no to the most extravagant ones, and Olivia locked herself in her room for 3 days without talking to anyone. Then, when she was 17, she demanded we take her to Paris for her birthday because apparently all her friends were traveling to Europe and she couldn't be less than them. And when I explained that year, my business had some problems and we didn't have that kind of budget available, she accused me of being cheap and not loving her like a real daughter, which, honestly, I hurt quite a bit because I was trying to be fair and reasonable. But wait, because it gets worse. When she turned 18, Olivia crashed Melissa's car, a 2018 Honda Civic that was practically brand new because she was texting while driving. And instead of taking responsibility or showing even a little bit of remorse, she came home and said, "Well, now I need my own car because obviously I can't share with Mom." And Melissa, who always felt guilty about the whole situation with Christopher and having raised her without a father present, would look at me with those pleading eyes like asking me to solve the problem, and I ended up helping pay for the Civic repairs and buying Olivia a modest used car, nothing fancy, a 2015 Toyota Corolla. And you know what she did? She complained on Instagram that her stepfather had bought her a poor person's car while her friends were getting BMWs and Audis from their dads. One day I came home from work and there was a dog in the house, a golden retriever that Olivia had adopted without consulting anyone, and when I asked her what the hell had happened because I have moderate allergies to dogs and we had never discussed having pets, she said she needed an emotional support animal for her anxiety, and Melissa defended her, saying that if the dog helped her, then we had to be understanding. So now, in addition to everything I had to deal with, taking antihistamines every day in my own house. Then Olivia decided she wanted to be a model. She didn't have the height or the experience or anything, but she hired a photographer to make her a professional portfolio that cost like $2,000. And when I received the charge on the credit card that Melissa shared with me, I almost had a heart attack. And when I complained to Melissa, she just said that Olivia needed to explore her dreams and that I was too hard on her. So, anyway, Olivia was 20 years old when what basically destroyed everything happened. By that time, she was at the local community college studying I don't know what. She changed majors every semester. And one day she came home all excited saying she had an incredible business idea that she was going to create a skincare product line, like creams and serums and those things, and that she needed $7,000 to start, to buy ingredients and containers and register the brand and make a website. I sat down with her and asked her to show me her business plan, her financial projections, her market research, anything that would indicate this wasn't just another whim, and she basically showed me some notes on her phone and some competitor products she had searched on Amazon. Nothing serious, nothing concrete. I told her no, that $7,000 wasn't a small amount, and that she needed to show me she had thought this through before I invested that kind of money. That if she really wanted to do this, then she could start with something smaller, research more, create a prototype, and if it worked, then we could talk about bigger investments. Olivia went hysterical, screaming that I never supported her, that I always found excuses not to give her what she needed, that Sarah had probably been right when she had told Melissa to be careful about Olivia taking advantage of me. Yes, my ex-wife and my new wife had met at a school event, and Sarah, who is a very perceptive woman, had seen all this coming years ago and had tried to subtly warn me, and that I was a bitter man who didn't understand what it was like to have dreams. Melissa tried to calm her down, but also looked at me like expecting me to give in. And I held my position because, honestly, I was already tired of being the family ATM. What happened next, I still have trouble processing. Like a week after denying her the money, I was at work reviewing some blueprints when Melissa called me crying. I could barely understand what she was saying. And when she finally calmed down a bit, she told me that Olivia had confessed to her that I had had inappropriate behavior with her, that I had made her feel uncomfortable with comments and looks, and that she had been keeping this for years but couldn't anymore. I was completely frozen, literally couldn't even breathe properly, because that was probably the most serious and most false accusation anyone had made against me in my entire life. I told Melissa that was completely false. That never, ever, not in a million years would I do something like that I didn't even know where Olivia had gotten that idea. But Melissa was trapped between believing her daughter and believing me, and I could hear in her voice that the doubt was already there. That night when I got home, Olivia was locked in her room, and Melissa was in the living room waiting for me with red eyes from crying so much. I tried to talk to her, explain that this was obviously manipulation because I had denied her the money, but she kept saying things like, I need time to process this and I don't know what to believe, and Olivia wouldn't have reason to make up something like this. I asked her to talk all three of us together, to confront this directly, but she said Olivia was too traumatized to see me and needed space. I slept on the couch that night, basically didn't sleep at all, just stayed staring at the ceiling thinking how my life had become this nightmare in a matter of hours. The next day I hired a lawyer, a guy who specializes in family cases and defense against false accusations, because I knew this could escalate quickly and destroy not just my marriage, but my reputation, my career, my entire life. My lawyer told me I needed to start documenting everything immediately. Every interaction, every conversation, every detail. Because in cases like these, evidence is everything, and unfortunately we live in a time where an accusation can ruin someone even without proof. I started making a timeline of all my movements, got bank statements showing where I had been and when, talked to neighbors to see if they had ever noticed anything unusual. They all said I had always been respectful and appropriate, and basically became a detective of my own life trying to prove my innocence. But the thing is, I also started doing something else. Something my lawyer suggested, but that made me feel dirty doing it, even though it was necessary. I installed voice-activated recorders in the common areas of my house, the living room, the kitchen, places where there was no expectation of privacy according to my state's laws, and I also reviewed the entire security system I had installed outside the house, the cameras that captured the entrance and the yard. My lawyer explained that I needed concrete evidence that Olivia was lying, not just my word against hers, because unfortunately in the court of public opinion I was already losing just by being the adult man accused. About 2 weeks passed of unbearable tension. Melissa and I basically didn't talk except for essentials. Olivia kept locked in her room doing who knows what, and I felt like a stranger, in my own house. But then interesting things started happening. One afternoon, The recorders captured a conversation between Olivia and a friend who had come to visit her. And basically, Olivia was laughing and telling her friend that her plan was working perfectly, that I was terrified, and that soon I would have to give her the money for her to retract her accusations. And the friend asked her if she didn't feel bad about ruining someone's life with such serious lies. And Olivia literally said, "And I have this recorded word for word. He brought it on himself for being so cheap with me. Plus, my mom will always believe me over him, so basically I already won." I have to admit that when I heard that recording, I felt a mixture of relief because I had proof of her lie and absolute fury. Because this person had been living in my house, eating my food, using my money, and now was trying to destroy my life like it was a game. I kept collecting evidence. Found text messages on her phone which Melissa shared access with me because Olivia was still on our family plan, where she told her friends she hated living with me and was going to find a way to get me out of the picture so her mom and she could keep the house. I also discovered Instagram posts she had made and then deleted where she basically said her stepfather was an obstacle to her dreams and that she was soon going to get rid of him. But wait, there's still the best part, or the worst, depending on how you look at it. About a month after making the initial accusations, Olivia approached me directly. I was in the garage organizing some tools when she came in, and the voice recorder I had hidden there captured everything. She basically told me we could resolve this easily, that if I gave her $50,000, yes, $50,000, she would retract her accusations and tell Melissa she had misinterpreted things, that she had been confused and emotionally unstable. I stood there, unable to believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was direct extortion, a federal crime, and this 20-year-old girl thought she could get away with it. I asked her, trying to stay calm even though inside I was boiling, why $50,000? And she explained, with all the nerve in the world, that she needed $7,000 for her skincare business, another $10,000 to move to an apartment in the city because she no longer wanted to live in the boring suburbs, $15,000 to buy a new car because the Corolla I had given her was an embarrassment, and the rest was basically for the inconvenience and stress I had caused her by denying her things during all these years. I told her I would think about it. I needed time. And she smiled and said I had a week or else she was going to the police with her story. She left the garage all confident, and I immediately called my lawyer and sent him the recording. My lawyer told me we now had everything we needed, that this was clear extortion and that we also had evidence that the original accusations were false. But he warned me that what was coming wasn't going to be easy, that confronting all this was going to blow up my marriage, and it was probably going to be devastating for Melissa to discover to what extent her daughter was capable of lying and manipulating. We decided to do a controlled confrontation, basically organize a meeting where I would present all the evidence, and my lawyer helped me plan every detail because this had to be done right, with no room for Olivia to retract or invent more lies. I set up my phone to record video discreetly. My lawyer verified this was legal in my state because it was my house and I had the right to record. And one night, I asked Melissa and Olivia to sit in the living room because I needed to talk to them about something important. Melissa looked nervous, probably thinking I was going to admit something or ask for a divorce. And Olivia looked almost bored, like this was just another unimportant family drama. I started by telling them that during the last few weeks I had been doing my own investigation because the accusations Olivia had made were extremely serious, and I needed to understand what was really happening, and that I had discovered some very disturbing things. I took out my laptop and started showing them the audio recordings, one by one. First, the conversation with her friend, where she admitted she was lying and laughing about the plan. Melissa turned pale and looked at Olivia with an expression I had never seen on her, like shock mixed with horror. Then I showed the text messages where she talked about getting me out of the picture, then the deleted Instagram posts I had managed to recover with help from a technician, and finally, the final blow, the recording of the conversation in the garage where she asked me for $50,000 to retract. With each piece of evidence, Olivia got smaller and smaller on the couch, and Melissa started crying in a way I had never seen, like deep sobs coming from the soul. Olivia tried to defend herself, first saying the recordings were taken out of context, Then that I had manipulated them somehow. Then that it had all been a misunderstanding. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming and specific. Melissa finally yelled at Olivia, something I had never heard come out of her mouth. She asked her how she could have done something so vile and despicable, how she could have tried to destroy the life of someone who had only tried to help them, how she could be so selfish and cruel, and Olivia, instead of showing remorse or asking for forgiveness, started blaming everyone, saying I had never been a real father to her, that Melissa had always prioritized her relationship with me over her, that Christopher had abandoned them and nobody understood her pain, basically playing the victim card to the last second. I told Melissa, trying to maintain some composure, even though I was shaking, that this couldn't continue. That I needed Olivia out of my house immediately, because I wasn't going to live under the same roof with someone who had tried to destroy my life and extort me. And that I would completely understand if Melissa decided to leave with her because she was her daughter, but that I couldn't forgive or forget what had happened. Melissa looked at me with tears running down her face and apologized to me, told me she should have seen the signs, that she should have set boundaries years ago, that her guilt about the situation with Christopher had blinded her and turned Olivia into a monster, and that she didn't know what to do because she loved her daughter but also realized that what she had done was unforgivable. That same night, Olivia packed her things, well, some of her things, because she had so much accumulated junk that not everything fit in her car, and went to stay with a friend. Melissa stayed a few more days trying to save something of the marriage, but we both knew it was impossible. Trust was completely destroyed, not in her necessarily, but in the entire situation. I could no longer see our marriage without thinking about everything that had happened, about how I had been falsely accused, manipulated, and extorted, and Melissa carried enormous guilt for having raised someone capable of doing this. The following week, Melissa also moved out. She went to temporarily live with her sister while looking for an apartment, and I hired a locksmith to change all the locks on my house because I didn't trust that Olivia hadn't made copies of the keys. I started the divorce process immediately. It was a relatively simple divorce because we had a prenuptial agreement we had signed before getting married. Thank God for that. And because Melissa didn't fight anything, I think she genuinely felt devastated by everything and didn't have the energy to fight. The divorce was finalized about 6 months later, much faster than my first divorce, curiously, and during that time, I basically focused on rebuilding my life and my reputation because, even though formal charges were never filed against me, rumors had already started circulating in the neighborhood and in some social circles. But Olivia didn't stay quiet, of course not. About 2 months after moving out, she created a whole narrative on social media about how her abusive stepfather had thrown her out on the street and separated her from her mother. She even made a GoFundMe, asking for donations to help her pay for therapy and living expenses because, supposedly, she was devastated by the trauma. Some of her friends believed her at first and shared her story, but then some other friends who knew the truth, including the friend who had been in that recorded conversation where Olivia admitted she was lying, started commenting on her posts exposing her lies, and eventually the whole scheme fell apart and she had to delete the GoFundMe after raising barely like $200. I found out from Melissa, with whom I maintained minimal contact after the divorce because she deserved to know how things were, that Olivia eventually dropped out of college and moved to Texas to try to connect with Christopher, her biological father. But apparently that didn't work out well because he already had a new family and wasn't interested in having a relationship with the adult daughter he barely knew. The last time Melissa told me anything about her, Olivia was working in retail and living with roommates in a small apartment. Her dream of the skincare business obviously never materialized because she didn't have the money or the discipline to make it a reality. The divorce was finalized about 1.5 years ago, and honestly, I'm still processing everything. I stepped away from the charity work I used to do with youth organizations because now I'm afraid that any interaction with minors could be misinterpreted or used against me, which saddens me because I really enjoyed that work, but I can't risk it anymore. Sarah, my first wife, has been surprisingly supportive through all this. She told me she always knew something was wrong with the dynamic between Olivia and Melissa, but didn't want to sound like the jealous ex-wife trying to cause problems, and now we get along better than ever. Ironically, because we share this understanding of what it's like to deal with complicated family situations. My house feels different now. Quieter, but also emptier. I no longer have to worry about absurd demands or constant drama or walking on eggshells in my own home. But I also don't have the family I thought I was building when I married Melissa. I've gone on some casual dates, but I'm still not ready for anything serious. Every time I meet someone who has kids, I feel this immediate anxiety. Like my brain automatically starts looking for red flags of manipulative behavior or parents who don't set boundaries. And I know that's not healthy, but that's where I am right now. What bothers me most, looking back, is that all the signs were there from the beginning. The escalation of unreasonable demands, the fact that Melissa never said no to anything, the way Olivia saw me as a resource instead of as a person, and I chose to ignore those signs because I wanted to believe we could be a happy family, that love and patience would eventually win. I learned the hard way that some people are so used to manipulating and getting their way that when they finally meet someone who sets boundaries with them, they're willing to go to absolutely immoral extremes to regain control, and that guilt and lack of parental boundaries can create monsters, literally. Last week, I ran into Melissa at the supermarket. It was the first time we'd seen each other in person since the divorce was finalized. We talked briefly. She looked tired, but maybe a bit more at peace. She told me she's in therapy, trying to process everything that happened and her role in creating the situation, and she told me that Olivia doesn't talk to her much anymore because Melissa finally started setting boundaries with her after all this. I asked her if she regretted marrying me, and she said no, that she regretted not being a better mother and a better wife by not handling Olivia from the beginning, but that our relationship itself had been good until everything exploded. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse, honestly, but I guess it's some closure. So here I am, 46 years old, twice divorced, living alone again in the house that was supposed to be a home for a happy blended family, still dealing with the trauma of having been falsely accused of something horrible and basically extorted in my own house, and trying to rebuild my trust in people and relationships. I don't know what the moral of this story is. I guess if there is one, it's that you should trust your instincts when you see problematic behavior, that setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person but protects you, and that some people are so broken that no matter how much love or resources you give them, it will never be enough, and they'll eventually drag you down with them if you're not careful. And yes, that you should always, always document everything when you feel something isn't right, because at the end of the day, your word and your evidence are all you have to protect yourself.